Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it feels good to be back. I mean, we took a small break, went to Florida to see the family for Easter, and I believe we haven't had a Dynasty live stream in 3-4 days. We have not had a chance to look at these Dynasty teams in quite some time, but I'm excited. We are back. We are going to be diving into some 2023 real Dynasty fantasy football teams, grading them, trying to come up with some advice, trying to come up with a rookie draft strategy and who we should be taking at what picks, possibly making some trades before the draft. Real quick, if you have not done so already, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, and if you want to help me feed this beautiful little thing, if you want to get your Dynasty team broken down, if you want access to my Dynasty rankings, you can find that on flockfantasy.com. Promo code FLOCK, 30% off any subscription. Not only that, but you can have your team featured on one of these bad boys. You want to tell them? You want to tell them? Promo code FLOCK, flockfantasy.com. It doesn't get better than that, ladies and gentlemen. Perfect ad read. But let's go ahead. Let's dive into this. We are going to start it off here with Noctorious PIP. Thank you, my friend, for being a member of the Flock and supporting the channel. Let's go ahead and let's dive into this. Year 2 of the startup, 12-team Superflex, 4-point passing touchdown league, PPR with 1.5 tight end premium. Made a couple trades already. We shipped Christian McCaffrey, Treylon Burks, John Mechie, and a future first. And we bought Garrett Wilson for Allen Lazard, Gabriel Davis after week 1. Okay, first off, phenomenal Garrett Wilson deal. Obviously, looking back, hindsight's 2020, but even at the time, you should have known that was a straight-up robbery. In terms of Christian McCaffrey for Burks, the future first, I mean, kind of depends on where that first-round pick ended up landing. If it's like the 101, 102, 103, probably ended up fine. We also traded Danny Dollars for a 2024 first, which should be good because the guy's team is old and not good. We're a bit nervous about our quarterback situation with Lance in the 104. I feel like we may have to grab another wild card with Anthony Richardson. I've thought about packaging picks for a good quarterback, but this is our first time playing Dynasty. Not sure where to go from here. I sold Christian McCaffrey and Daniel Jones because I was hoping to get a good enough pick for CJ Stroud after Trey Lance got hurt, but I placed myself right out of this range. Okay, so essentially, Lance went down, and we were like, okay, let's go ahead and let's pseudo-tank. That way we can get an exciting rookie in this next year's class. Didn't work out, but my friend, I mean, we're sitting with Joe Burrow at the very top here. When you have Burrow at the very top, you have so much flexibility with what you were able to do through the rest of the roster, particularly at the quarterback position, where, yeah, I mean, if we're looking at Trey Lance, not necessarily a quarterback that we can be super confident is a quarterback one in Dynasty, but someone that definitely has upside. I mean, as a quarterback too, in my mind, I really like the Burrow-Lance combo, especially in a 4-point passing touchdown format when we're chasing rushing upside. I mean, we have Jimmy Garoppolo as well. So if all goes wrong, if we're looking at Lance and say, okay, well, somehow, some way, he's not a starter this next season, which I'll say, if we're going back the past 20 years and looking at quarterbacks selected in the top 3 of the NFL draft, the quarterback who started the fewest amount of games through that entire list, it's like 30 quarterbacks or so, was 25. Jamarcus Russell. Like the biggest bust of all time, still started 25 games. It's the worst case scenario for Trey Lance there. So I think Lance will be a starter. I think he will have some rushing upside. Worst case scenario, we're rolling with Jimmy Garoppolo. So going over to that rookie pick, like you already mentioning, 104, we're kind of thinking Anthony Richardson. I mean, honestly, even if our quarterback situation was perfect, I would still probably advise you to go with a quarterback at the 104. I mean, in my mind, yes, Jackson Smith and Jigba, phenomenal prospect, but 12-team Superflex League, if you end up getting young Stroud, Richardson falling due at the 104, assuming that Anthony Richardson is a top 5 NFL draft pick with his rushing upside, similar to why we whiffed on Trey Lance, we'll be ready to take Anthony Richardson there, my friend. But quarterback overall, I mean, I was surprised to see how good this spot is when you were saying that you were a little worried about it. Going over to RB, we're rolling with Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs. So both younger options. I mean, obviously, Jacobs no longer on the rookie deal, but was drafted so damn young in 2019. The man was like, what, 20 years old? Youngest running back in that draft class. He's still surprisingly young. Dylan, in my mind, is one of my favorite RB3, RB4 targets in Dynasty Fantasy Football right now with everybody off of him. Beyond that, I mean, not a ton of depth, but overall running back room is just fine, and I think we can be competitive with that. Going over to wide receiver, we have Garrett Wilson, top 5 wide receiver Dynasty. We have Ayuk, Traylon Burks, solid wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, Deontay, wide receiver 4. I mean, I think we're in a pretty good spot. Overall, we're lacking a little bit of depth. We have Kadarius Toney down there, which is fine, but it's nice to have pick 10 here. Greg Dulcich at tight end is kind of whatever. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan, but at the end of the day, he had a good rookie season. I mean, this is a player that should presumably get better considering the fact that rookie tight ends generally don't do anything. So, I mean, I completely think it's fine at tight end. Of course, it's not the best situation in the world, but usually outside of having, I mean, Travis Kelce, you really never know what you have at tight end. Going over to the 110, 203, I actually think that these are important picks for this team in particular, because if we are looking at the overall construction of the roster, I mean, this is a team that if we have, say, Lance producing well, or maybe Anthony Richardson hitting week 1, and then at least a breakout from Traylon Burks. If you get that Burks breakout, this team's ready to compete immediately. Like, this team is ready to make a push, but if there was any critique to this team, it's that it feels like we're just a little bit light on the depth. Like, after A.J. Dillon at running back, we fall off a cliff. After Deontay Johnson at wide receiver, we fall off a cliff. I mean, and if we are already relying with those guys in our starting lineup, I mean, it just puts us in a very compromising position if anything were to go wrong this upcoming season, where, I mean, that's entirely possible. It's fantasy football. Of course, something's going to be going wrong here. So having that 110 in my mind is perfect for us, because I think we will most likely get a player that has a shot to make a difference year 1. If we're looking at the 110, the guys we know for sure won't be available: Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jackson Smith-Njigba. And then at quarterback, we know for sure you are not going to have Young, Stroud, Richardson, maybe Levis Falls, probably not. But you're most likely going to be looking at one of Addison, Quentin Johnston, Zach Charbonnet. I understand a lot of people are going through and trying to hype up Zay Jones, saying that he should be going over the... I'm not buying it. I understand with Zay Jones, he's a fine prospect. I mean, the man stayed all 4 years in school. His best season from a market share perspective is comparable to what Quentin Johnson as like a sophomore, as Jordan Addison had as a sophomore. I'm not putting Zay Jones in that range, but regardless, I mean, I think that if you're able to bring in like Quentin Johnston to a team like this, of course, it's not guaranteed Johnston's going to be good, but with a ton of positive traits on a profile like that, or a profile like Jordan Addison's, I think that could be a player that actually pushes us over the edge just a bit. Now, this is advice that I give to a lot of people, so it's not necessarily super unique to this team in particular, but I do think it falls in this bucket. If we're looking at this roster, right, we have, in my mind, 1 to 2 breakout candidates away from being a true contender. Like, say Trey Lance does what we want him to do. Say he is actually a top 10 quarterback this next season, please God. If that happens, then we are in a phenomenal situation right away. Then if we have that Traylon Burks breakout, we're looking most likely like a contending roster this season. And if that's the case, where we're sitting at week 3, we're sitting week 4, we're going, man, I started 3-1. We have the second most points in our league, but looking across the rest of the league, there are a couple juggernauts out there that we can compete with this season. Our rosters, I mean, hitting on all cylinders. We're just missing a piece or two. Then at that point, we can go through, and if we're looking at maybe some of these rookies that we took, maybe we took Josh Downs at the 203, and we go, okay, well, let's try to package together maybe Josh Downs, Darnell Washington, who we took at the beginning of the 3rd, and then maybe a couple of these crap 4th round picks, and let's throw them together with, I don't know, maybe Brandon Ayuk, and try to go out there and get T. Higgins. Now, of course, I mean, it's maybe a long shot to be able to pull a trade like that, but given the team that we are looking at, if we were able to parlay maybe a rookie finding a little bit of success early on to a wide receiver that gives us a significant upgrade in the starting lineup, I think that could be a path that we're looking at if we find success early in the season. Another path that we could look at making is if we don't want to trade maybe, say, a rookie that's hitting well for us at the beginning of the season, is we have that extra 2024 first-round pick alongside our own. If we are sitting week 4, week 3, and we find ourselves in that successful mold, then at that point, maybe you go through and go, you know what, man? yeah, I think we can actually contend this season. Let's go through and let's sell our 2024 first, and let's go get Christian Watson. Let's go get one more wide receiver that we can feel comfortable about putting in that flex spot, particularly through the bye weeks, through any injuries that we may have. On the flip side of the coin, it is definitely a possibility that maybe Treylon Burks doesn't break out, and maybe Trey Lance is never a top 10 quarterback in fantasy, which is entirely possible. And if that doesn't happen, and we're looking at this roster, we're going, oh crap, you know what? We started off 1-3. We are second to last in this league. The quarterback we took at 4 in Anthony Richardson may not start for half a season, so we're having to rely on Jimmy Garoppolo. Then at that point, maybe a month into the season, we want to maintain that flexibility where we can then pivot off of some of these veterans. Then at that point, look to sell Josh Jacobs and get an extra 2024 first, and then go through and play for 2024 and build around Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, whoever we take at the 104 this year, Joe Burrow for the long term, while then being able to replenish this roster with 3 first-round picks next season. So this is a team that I think has the pieces to either contend or to make the play to build long-term. But similar to what I've told a lot of people up until this point, I think that when you're kind of sitting on that fence, well, yes, we want to make that decision. At some point, we're going to have to make that decision. One thing that I used to make the mistake about in Dynasty is I used to just sit there and look at my Dynasty roster all day. And I go, I got to figure this out right now. And if you're loading up Sleeper and you're looking at that every single day, eventually you're going to start making some trades. I think with a roster like this, and I think a lot of people watching this live stream probably have something similar, it's almost better to wait a month until the season. That way we get more clarity and we're able to make a move at that point, knowing which direction we're going in. We've said this before, but it's like trying to jump into a river without figuring out where the stream's headed and then deciding I'm going to swim in that direction before we even figure out where the stream's going. I would rather wait until the season, jump in the river, and then let the river decide which way we're going in and then swim in that direction as fast as possible. But I think that should be it for this breakdown. Again, thank you so much, my friend, for being a member of the flock. Really like your idea of just going through and taking a quarterback at the 104. I wouldn't try to package another player with the 104 to get an immediate upgrade in the starting lineup currently, because I do think that this team lacks a little bit of depth. So going through and making those 2-for-1 deals may not make a lot of sense here in particular, but I think that should be it. Again, thank you so much, my friend, for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. If there's ever anything that I can do for you, please do not hesitate to let me know. Reach out to me, especially if there's any way that I can improve flockfantasy.com for you. I mean, we have some massive improvements coming that I am excited to get your opinion on. But if you have any ideas, anything that you want to see in the works, please let me know. And then we have, I believe, a question coming out from Tanner says, how do I send my team in? I'm more than stacked than any of these teams. We have the 101, 104. Okay, so if you signed up to flockfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK and got a Mother Flocker package, and you want your team broken down in either a personalized podcast or on this live stream, just make sure you're in our Discord chat. Go through and in the Join Here tab under Setup, you essentially just send your flockfantasy.com username, and then the developers will go through and they will unlock all the channels for you in this Discord, including the roster submission channel. You can't see this until you actually make that purchase and confirm it through the Join Here side with flockfantasy.com. But once you do that, please just send your team in. I'll be happy to look at it. But I'm going to be happy to look at Cryptic's team here. Says, hey, Mason, this is a 12-team, 2-quarterback PPR league. I'm curious to get your advice about next steps to turn this into a contender. One unique aspect of this league is how the pick order is determined. The 6 teams who missed the playoffs play in the Toilet Bowl. Winner of the Toilet Bowl gets 101, runner-up 102. It's kind of weird because teams who are in the middle of the road tend to do well in the Toilet Bowl and win the 101. Might be relevant to my approach this season. So I've actually played in a league like this before, and I've heard a lot of people advocate for this. I mean, I feel like back in 2017, 2018, this was kind of like the hot thing to do, to say, okay, well, we want to de-incentivize tanking. We don't want anybody trying to tank to get the 101. We want everybody trying to be competitive and everybody caring about the league in weeks 14, 15, 16. In theory, it is a fun and good league setting. In reality, if you play this out, and I'm sure you've seen this in a ton of your own leagues, within the span of 2 or 3 seasons, a dynasty owner can ruin their team to an extreme level, right? Like it can be a garbage roster. And I understand you're saying, okay, well, Mason, that's not going to be my roster. I'm really good. I'm great at Dynasty. I don't have to worry about that. But the issue is, if you're playing in a league with two guys that just ruin their roster with 2 or 3 bad trades, and then they don't have the chance to get the 101, they don't have a chance to get the 102, they're just going to be losing in the toilet bowl and getting the 106. It is a quick way to make sure that the bad teams get even worse to a point where the league health is at jeopardy. So in theory, I think it's a very fun league. And I think if you have a lot of guys who really know what they're doing, I mean, you can kind of get away with it. But in practicality, I mean, I personally have not loved the league setting. But let's go ahead and let's look at this team. Keep in mind, 12-team, 2-quarterback format, 2 QB league. I mean, I used to think it played similar to Superflex. In reality, once you play in enough 2-quarterback formats, you realize, yeah, there's definitely a difference with QB value in that 2 QB league compared to Superflex, at least if you have 12 or more teams here. So I definitely want to be building around a couple elite level quarterbacks if we can. We have Trevor Lawrence, QB1, going down to the bench. We really don't. Oh, no, we have Justin Herbert. Thank God. Okay, so we have Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, QB1, QB2. So we are in a position where we are going to have both elite production in the long term and very good production in the short term. So I think we can be ecstatic about what we have at quarterback. These are 2 top 6 overall picks in this kind of format in a dynasty startup draft. Just absolutely beautiful. Now, going over to running back, we're going to be rolling with Royce Freeman, J.K. Dobbins in the starting lineup. And then going down to the bench, I mean, we have Dearness Johnston, Joshua Kell. We don't really have anybody at running back. Hopefully, we have some exciting rookie picks. We have the 105, 108, 109. We definitely can come away with the running back here. The thing is, are we sure we want to be reaching on Jahmyr Gibbs at the 105 over a player like Jackson Smith-Njigba? Probably not, unless the landing spot and draft capital just screams that we should, even if that maybe is our quote-unquote team need when we really only have J.K. Dobbins here. But going over to wide receiver, we're going to be rolling with Devonta Smith, Garrett Wilson in the starting lineup. And then going down to the bench, I mean, we have Brandon Ayuk, Treylon Burks. So, I mean, I guess we have 4 quality wide receivers that we can rely on a week-to-week basis. But in reality, if we're going to be looking at this league where we can start up to 5 wide receivers, it's a team that not only has that need at running back too, but at the same time, I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba would make a notable difference. Like if you're able to go through and bring in JSN and play him on a week-to-week basis at this empty wide receiver slot, or Chris Moore instead of the flex. Of course, we have Treylon Burks and Brandon Ayuk to pull up from the bench, but almost regardless, I think that we should be willing and open to go best player available at the 105 there, and don't feel the need to push up Jahmyr Gibbs just because we may quote unquote on paper need running back a little bit more. Because while Jahmyr Gibbs will definitely make a difference for this team, I could say the same thing about Jackson Smith-Njigba. So I still think that we wait for the NFL draft, get confirmation on both draft capital and landing spot for both players, have a little more info there before we have to go through and make that decision. But now going over to tight end, beautiful spot to be in. We have TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson, if not a top 2 tight end in Dynasty, is definitely a top 3 tight end in Dynasty. Super happy to be there both for the short term and the long term. Going over to Cole Kmet at tight end, I think he's a fine tight end too. Daniel Bellinger, obviously not much after Darren Waller. Now, what's going to be interesting is looking at this team, right? Because going back to what we were discussing, this team is not incentivized to go through and quote unquote tank. Like even if the season goes poorly, right? Where the team previous to this, we said if the season begins poorly, if we have a really brutal stretch through the first month, we're set up in a position to maybe just try to sell some veteran assets, get the rookie pick 101 next year, bring in Caleb Williams. This isn't the case. If the worst team in the league doesn't get the 101, if the second worst team in the league doesn't get the 102, etc., and it's going to be the winner of the toilet bowl who gets that pick, we really are never going to be incentivized to go full-blown tank mode. And that's the appeal of this format. A lot of people like that about this format, in that we are highly incentivized to just make sure that we are trying to go out of our way and we are trying to score points immediately and win this year. Because if we win this year, we win money. If we barely miss the playoffs but then win the toilet bowl, we get the 101 in Caleb Williams next season. So we really don't want to be thinking in terms of, okay, we have to send our team in either the rebuilding or contending direction. We just kind of want to start contending immediately while, of course, not giving up long-term upside at the same time. So going back to what we were discussing at that 105, I still stand by the fact that I do think there are 3 players in the mix here, especially in a true 2 quarterback format where we don't have a real quarterback 3. If Levis were to go top 5 of the NFL draft and he has some rushing upside and it's a true 2 quarterback format and you don't love the landing spot for either Jackson Smith-Njigba or Jahmyr Gibbs, I would be fine if you wanted to go through and pull the trigger on Will Levis. I think in a format like this, that could be acceptable, but still, like we already discussed, I think that Jahmyr Gibbs could make a difference with this team. I think that you could have Jackson Smith-Njigba making a difference with this team. So I don't necessarily think that we have to map out one for one exactly what we are looking to do this second. I think that we just play it by ear. I mean, wait until the NFL draft, get the additional data points, and then make the decision then when we can have a more informed decision overall. And then going over to the 108, 109, I mean, in my mind, I think we almost have a similar thing that we're going to be looking at. 108, 109, I think you're most likely going to be looking at 3 players: Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, Zach Charbonnet. I know a lot of people are super excited about maybe, say, Zay Flowers with that pick. Personally, I wouldn't be going in that direction. Personally, I think that if you're looking at the Zay Flowers profile, shouldn't really compare to those other top-level prospects that, I mean, broke out early, declared early for the NFL draft, that dominated at different points of their collegiate careers. Yeah, so I think that if this was my team, while we do need running back, instead of trying to address it and force a pick in the rookie draft, I would almost immediately plan on just going best player available at the 105, either being Levis or JSN. 108, 109 being Jordan Addison as well as Quentin Johnston, with the assumption that Levis doesn't fall to us at 8 or Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't fall to us at 8. Obviously, if Gibbs falls, it's going to be an easy pick, and that's definitely a possibility. I mean, we could end up seeing that happen, because if we go through and take those best player available options, say in May, we could always go through, if we decide that we're a running back away from being a true contender, we want to make that push, we can always go and trade for a running back at the beginning of the season. But overall, I really like the team, my friend. And I mean, it is kind of nice, I guess, in this format, not having to think, okay, well, are we going to go ahead and are we going to push for the full-blown tank rebuild and get Caleb Williams next year? Because even if we wanted to go for that, we should still try to be competitive at the beginning of the season or at the end of the year as well. But thank you again, my friend, for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. Really hope that you were able to get something from that. Really hope that we were able to help you out in some way. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, especially if there's any way that I can improve flockfantasy.com, don't hesitate to let me know. But now let's go over to our next team. This one's going to come out from Mary Binkmiss. Says, can go on YouTube. Hey, Mason, it's a 12-team PPR Superflex tight end premium format. We took over this team from a guy who couldn't get a good quarterback in the startup. As you can see, I'm rebuilding in a big way. Would love to get your thoughts on what we should be doing with these assets / which rookies we should be looking to draft this upcoming season. Thanks. No, thank you again, my man, for being a member of the vlog. First off, let's go ahead and let's look at the league settings here, see if there's anything that we need to point out. Actually, a couple things. So you're getting 6 points per passing touchdown format, which immediately says, okay, maybe we should go through and maybe we should play a little heavier on the quarterbacks that can have a ton of passing volume rather than the rushing upside guys. But on the flip side of that, I mean, you are in a spot where you are getting 0.2 points per carry. So we all know 0.2 points per carry, or at least you should know this, highly incentivizes you to build around running back, to have some very exciting options at the running back position, especially because, I mean, you want them in every single flex spot. Not only does it incentivize you to build around running back to put in every flex, but to go along with this, it also incentivizes you to build around rushing quarterbacks that could possibly have 100 rushing attempts on the season, aka additional 20 points. So in reality, I mean, I don't necessarily think that we should be trying to change the prototype of quarterback that we're looking for too much. I think it kind of balances out, but it would be really nice to get a quarterback like Josh Allen that's just going to score a bazillion points in this kind of league. But going over to the roster itself, real quick, I'm sorry, let me swing this over. Okay, perfect. Here we go. It's a team where we have Kirk Cousins at QB. I mean, if you're looking at Cousins, an option that actually won us a decent amount of money on Underdog this past year, but you kind of know what you're getting. The ceiling is going to be a little bit capped. Like, you're not going to get the ridiculous 400-point season that Josh Allen's going to give you in this format. And if you're going to be building around Cousins, the prototype himself, especially in this kind of league, I would prefer as a quarterback 2, quarterback 3 on a contending roster, right? You're definitely not wanting Kirk Cousins on that rebuilding team. Going down to the super flex spot, Jared Goff, I'd say kind of the same mold as Kirk Cousins. I'd say he's just a slightly worse version of Cousins, where if in this kind of league I had him as my QB2, I had him as my quarterback 3 on a contending team, yeah, sign me up for it. I'm pretty excited. I think that we can make it work. But to have Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff as our QB1, QB2 of what appears to be a rebuilding roster, it's almost the exact opposite of what we're looking for, right? Because for a rebuilding roster, hell, give me the 101. Let me take Caleb Williams next year. That way I can have a quarterback to possibly drop 400 points in an individual season in this format. But these guys are going to be putting up just enough points for us to not earn the 101, not earn the 102. And at the same time, I mean, they're not going to be helping us win. We don't know how exciting they are in 2024. So immediately for me, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff are on the trade block. I think if we can sell Cousins for a 2024 first and second, let's do it. If we can sell Jared Goff for a 2024 first, let's do it. Now, we are going to have an issue with this because if we go through and look at the future picks that we already have accumulated, we have 4 first-round picks. So we've already done a good job trying to monopolize the market here. I still think we try to. I still think we try to. Especially if we could go through and maybe trade like Kirk Cousins for a quarterback like Will Levis that maybe, yeah, doesn't have nearly the same floor, especially in the short term, but possibly a little bit of a higher ceiling in the long term, but more importantly, won't be scoring points in our lineup year one or not. He won't be scoring too many points in our lineup year one, or he could still be coming away with Caleb Williams next year. So running back, when we're looking at a tanking team like this, I mean, we just sell anybody who steps into opportunity. The second that you have an injury to Rashad Penny and Kenneth Gainwell, you can get a second or third round pick for him. You go ahead and you sell him. I mean, I think that we kind of already know this. Say the same thing about Raheem Mostert. Going down there, we don't have to discuss that too much. Primarily going to be looking at running back in the 2023 rookie draft, as well as that 2024 draft. And going back to what we were discussing previously, when in doubt in this league, we're going running back over wide receiver. You go running back. You are getting 0.2 points per carry, which at the end of the day will make a noticeable difference. Like if you're playing in this kind of league and a running back comes away with 20 carries, that's an additional 5 points. Or I apologize. That's an additional 4 points in this format. And over the course of the season, those 4 points are a lot. That's equivalent to 40 rushing yards. Now, going over to wide receiver, Drake London's clearly the piece we're building around in the long term. I mean, London, I think he's an elite level talent, even if the situation is horrendous in the short term. It's kind of the player that we want on a rebuilding roster. Someone that the situation isn't great, but we believe in the talent. So, yeah, I think London's great here. Mike Evans is tough because we should clearly be trying to sell Mike Evans, but at the same time, it's like, what can we realistically get? Like, I'd be surprised if we could sell Mike Evans for a 2024 first, but if we could in this format, that's points per carry as well as Superflex, hell, sign me up for that immediately. I just don't necessarily think that that's something we can be doing at this time. I think we may end up having to try to wait until the beginning of the season before we can kind of expect that return for Mike Evans. Tight end, we don't need to talk about. We really just need to talk about these rookie picks. So if we were looking at the 108, the 110, generally I'm saying, okay, let's get Quentin Johnson. Let's get Jordan Addison. Let's get some of these wide receivers that we really like the profile of. But going back to what we were talking about with this being that points per carry league, we're not going to be changing the tiers of the players that we have. So right now, at that 108, 109, 110, we are looking at the tier being Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, Zach Charbonnet ranked in that order. I'm not all of a sudden going to be throwing Roschon Johnson up there because it's a points per carry league. But what I will be doing is I will be breaking the tie and leaning with the running back inside that tier. So in a league like this, 108 in that point per carry format, we're going Zach Charbonnet. That's the main thing that I'm focusing in on. Of course, if he falls to round 4 of the NFL draft somehow, some way, hell to the no, strong pivot. If he goes to a horrendous landing spot, hell to the no, strong pivot. We can stay flexible. But at the time, I think we are planning on Zach Charbonnet 108, assuming that we don't have one of those quarterbacks like Levis fall. And at the same time, assuming that we don't have maybe Jahmyr Gibbs falling. We go Zach Charbonnet 108 and then take whichever wide receiver falls between Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison 110. And assuming that both of them are off the board by the time we get to pick 11, even if I think when in doubt, we should be going running back here, I honestly think that you're most likely just going to end up going Zay Flowers. I mean, I would love if we had another running back in that range we could be excited about. But not really. I mean, really don't, if I'm going to be honest with you. So if we're going over to the 205, 212, generally in this range, I haven't really given too much guidance on exactly what we are going to be doing in rookie drafts, because I think before we have the official draft capital and landing spot for a lot of those borderline day 2, day 3 backs, very difficult to know which direction we should be going in. I mean, even between running back or a wide receiver. But in general, going back to this being that points per carry format, 205, 212, I am almost exclusively going with our favorite running back. Now, of course, if there's a wide receiver you love falling to the 205, if Jalen Hyatt, if Josh Downs makes it there and you're saying, you know what, Mason, I mean, I'm a Tennessee fan. I loved rooting for Jalen Hyatt in school. I'd love to have him on my dynasty. Sure, go ahead and take him. But in general, we are going to be breaking the ties for those rookie running backs, as we've said over and over again. Now, getting over to the 2024 picks, there's not too much to discuss. It's going to be stupid simple. Don't mess it up. Those 2024 first are gold. Those 2024 first are guaranteed assets to increase in value from April 2023 to April 2024. Not only are these assets guaranteed to increase in value, but at the same time, you don't want points in your lineup this year. So these picks accomplish a couple different things. A, they won't be scoring points in 2023, giving us and our 2024 first a good probability to earn the 101 and earn Caleb Williams. And 2, it is just an extremely safe and secure asset that we can be putting our resources in. So I personally really like hoarding on to these picks. Now, of course, if Jonathan Taylor tears his ACL week 1, and then all of a sudden someone offers you JT for a random 2024 first, sure, go ahead. And if someone is dramatically overpaying for the pick, you can sell it. But in general, don't overthink it. Don't think I have too many first-round picks on my team. Hold it out. Let that value increase going into next season. I think you are in a phenomenal spot, my friend. But thank you again so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel. And as always, if there is anything that I can do for you, please do not hesitate to let me know. I'd be really happy to incorporate, especially any idea that you have on flockfantasy.com. Just let me know what you want, my friend. But real quick, before we go to the next team, we have a donation question coming out from Cameron. Thank you, my friend. Says, 10-team Superflex. We have Trevor Lawrence, Josh Allen, Jordan Love, Trey Lance, Calvin Ridley, Breece Hall, Pat Frymuth, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk. We also have the 101, 109, 202, and 203. Contending team, what should we be doing with Jordan Love as well as Trey Lance? So I would say in general, if you were to go through and look to try to sell Trey Lance in Dynasty right now, I got 2 words for you. Good luck. Maybe we go 3 words. Good freaking luck here, okay? Because if you're looking at Lance, maybe you would have a chance to sell him in your Dynasty League if I was in it. If I was in it, sure, maybe you have a trade partner. But in reality, everybody is off of him. Like we mentioned in the video that we put out yesterday, If we go back the past 20 years, there have been only 2 out of like 30-something quarterbacks selected inside the top 3 picks of the NFL draft that have started fewer than 50 games in their NFL career. Those guys being Jamarcus Russell, who started 25 games as arguably the biggest bust in sports history, and RG3, who dealt with an immense amount of injuries. So that tells me if about 98%, or a little less than that, 95% of quarterbacks that are top 3 NFL draft picks start 50 or more games in their NFL career, Lance has, at the minimum, multiple seasons starting with rushing upside. I don't know if he'll succeed or fail, but he's going to be a starter. And given his rushing upside, I would say there's still a chance. Like I said, I'm a sicko. I am an idiot. There's still a chance that he has a very high ceiling. So I'm holding on to Lance. You're not going to get anything for him. I think that the market's too far off of him. Jordan Love, on the other hand, if you have Love as your QB3, QB4, especially in a 10-team league where we're sitting with Lawrence and Allen, if you wanted to go through and try to package together like Jordan Love, Pat Frymuth, and get back an elite level tight end, get back Kyle Pitts, get back TJ Hawkinson, I'd be completely fine with that. We could say the same thing about Love and Calvin Ridley. I mean, maybe you don't necessarily want to move Calvin Ridley because we have the stack with Trevor Lawrence, but maybe we go Jordan Love and Brandon Ayuk and try to get back a wide receiver like Garrett Wilson, like T. Higgins, like Jalen Waddle, someone in that tier that you can be excited both about the long-term outlook of as well as the short-term production. But thank you again, my friend, for supporting the channel. And let's go over to our next team here. This one coming out from Jake. Thank you, Jake, for being a member of the vlog. Says, what's up, Mason? Just got into Dynasty this season. We try to go youngish to get extra value for the future. Was I successful? LOL. 14-team league, Superflex, tight end premium. Unsure how to plan for the future with fantasy. Drafting will be easy with the 101 and 105, but not opposed to trading the 105. Offers aren't up to what we'd expect, though. Let me know what you think and so ideas around the 105 in future. Thanks again and stay golden. No, thank you so much for being a member of the flock, my friend. Let's go ahead and let's look at the league settings before we get into anything else here. I mean, super normal. We don't need to talk about those scoring settings at all. But what I do want to be focusing on will be the starting lineup requirements that we have for this league. I am sure that y'all been tired of hearing me say over and over again, okay, this is a shallow format. We're going to be trading 2 players for the best guy in return. Sell depth, get the best asset, blah, blah, blah. We repeat ourselves ad nauseum with that advice. But specifically with this being that 14-team Superflex league, where we are going through and we are starting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys. We are starting 140 total players in this league. That's an equivalent to 14 starters in a 10-team league. So this is almost the exact opposite. In a format like this, generally when I'm making trades, I would rather be the guy getting an extra wide receiver in return. If we can sit here and say, sell Devonta Smith, and then in return, we're able to get both Christian Watson and Christian Kirk. In a league like this, that is a win. When we can pick up that extra starter where depth is extremely hard to come by, that's going to be one of our primary objectives in general. Our second thing I'd focus in on will be quarterback production, quarterback production, quarterback production. If you're going to be looking at the supply and demand ratio and the supply and demand dynamic of a 14-team Superflex league in comparison to what you would have with maybe a 10-team Superflex league, a 12-team Superflex league. Here, I mean, you better be prepared to go ahead and pay up for quarterbacks. Because on average, in that 12-team Superflex league, everybody can have 2 to 3 quarterbacks. On average, in the 10-team Superflex league, everybody can have 3 to 4. In that 14-team Superflex league, you will find teams in the league with only 1 quarterback. Essentially, for every team in the league, plus or minus a few teams, that has 3 starters, there's going to be another team with only 1. This means they will be going higher in rookie drafts. This means if we try to go through and trade for one, they will be significantly more expensive. So overall, with this kind of league in general, love the settings, but we do need to be making the adjustment. We do need to be favoring depth, particularly at the wide receiver position when we can start up to 6 of those guys as well as quarterback, preferably players with job security. So starting off at our quarterback position, Justin Herbert, Daniel Jones, beautiful. I mean, both guys with job security. I mean, I'd say Herbert, definitely a top 14 quarterback. Daniel Jones, definitely a top 28 quarterback at the minimum. So, I mean, you're in a great spot. But going over to the rookie picks, I would say immediately, my plan is not to trade that 105. If you are having a hard time finding what you like at the 105, operating under the assumption that all the top quarterbacks this year go in the top 7-ish picks of the NFL draft, we are taking whoever falls. If somehow, some way we get Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson falling to us at 5, we take them. But even if they all go 2 through 4, we are going to go ahead. We are going to be pivoting and go Will Levis at 5. In a 14-team Superflex league, this is a different dynamic than a 12-teamer. This is a different dynamic than a 10-teamer. I am not entertaining the idea of going Jackson Smith-Njigba or Jahmyr Gibbs, operating under the assumption Will Levis is a top 10 NFL draft pick. I think we take the quarterback at 5, regardless of whoever falls. That way we can have the upside and the security to build around in the long term, because in a league like this, you never know when you're going to get another opportunity to address that position. Now, going over to running back, we're currently rolling with DeAndre Swift, RB1, Tyler Algier, RB2. Now, of course, we're adding in Bijan Robinson, so all these guys are going to slide down. So, in general, in a league like this, I'm not going to lie to you. We only have to start one running back. It's a 14-teamer where we can start up to 6 wide receivers, and it's a full PPR. I am willing to sell elite-level running backs for wide receiver. In my mind, this is where we go through. This is where we try to build around both top-end wide receiver talent as well as depth wide receiver. So if we could go through, if we could sell Bijan Robinson and in return bring back, say, CeeDee Lamb and another starter, I'm doing it. If we can sell Bijan Robinson and, say, bring back Jalen Waddle and who's another name we can be looking at? Drake London, I'm doing it. Like in a league like this, Bijan for Waddle in London, in my mind, makes a lot of sense with these specific league settings, especially if we're planning on for the future. I'm completely fine in a 14-team league where we're only having to start one running back going into the season, relying on Swift and Tyler Algier and trying to build out those wide receiver spots with a ton of depth and upside. Going over to wide receiver, we're rolling with Smith, Calvin Ridley, Jamison Williams in the starting lineup. Depth is going to be a little bit tough, but depth is tough for everybody in a 14-team league. So in general, I think that we are fine here. Obviously, as we were discussing, we kind of want to be making those 2-for-1 deals so we can be addressing that in general. Tight end Andrews. I like Andrews, the player. I like Andrews, the overall value in fantasy. I will say this is not necessarily the format for him, though. Like if we were looking at Andrews in particular, I think that you would be better suited in a shallower league where you're getting a bigger advantage off of just having that tight end edge, where here I may prefer having the wide receiver advantage top to bottom, if I'm going to be honest with you. But I think that should be it for this team. Again, thank you so much for being a member of the flock and supporting the channel, my friend. I know we talked a lot more about how we are going to be optimizing for the league settings rather than the actual team that we have in particular. I mean, I think that all the players that we have are fine. It's just more so focusing in on how we can optimize for those league settings in such a unique spot. But thank you again for everything, my friend. I really appreciate you, and I really hope that podcast was able to help you out. And Josh says, how do I send to my team? My friend, super easy. Flockfantasy.com, promo code FLOCK, Mother Flocker package. And then once you have that, once you've purchased a Mother Flocker package with promo code FLOCK on flockfantasy.com, then you join our Discord. It's on flockfantasy.com. Just click the link and send your flockfantasy.com username in the Join Here tab. Once you do that, give a little bit of time. The developers will go through and they will link your account on Discord to flockfantasy.com. And then at that point, you will unlock the roster submissions tab and you just send your team there with all the league settings. I'd be happy to get that to you in terms of a live stream or an individual personalized podcast, whatever you prefer. But I am sweating here, ladies and gentlemen. I have a lot of work that I need to do. So we're actually probably going to cut this live stream here. Thank you again so much for being a member of the Flock supporting the channel. There's nothing I really have to ask from you. Just thank you. Really hope you have a great day. I believe we have 15 days until the NFL draft, so a little over 2 weeks. I'm very, very excited about it. And yeah, thank you for everything. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you in probably 10-ish hours. No, a little bit more than that. 14 hours with the video. But thank you so much for everything.